Thank you. I forgive you guys for being late because I just heard there was a chocolate fountain involved and I missed it. I hate you guys now. But anyway, before I start, I just wanted to make a very quick disclaimer. What I'm going to say is my opinion. It's not my company's, not my wife's, not my partner's. It's just me. And if I offend anyone, because I'm going to mention some names and names of companies, I ask for forgiveness already at the start. So, does anybody here like to code in their spare time, build apps? Anybody? Great, because I love building apps, and I've been hooked ever since I wrote my first line of code and ran it on this 1981 pocket calculator. Now you can see it's not a very smart line of code. It took me like several minutes to find the break key, and I was panicking. Somebody told me it's going to burn and that kind of stuff. But honestly, I've been hooked ever since. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I love building apps even in my spare time. So it's also a hobby of mine. And please don't tell my employer this, but I would code even if they didn't pay me. But just don't tell him this. I'm just kidding. But in fact, I'm fortunate and very grateful to work for a company that not only tolerates this, but also encourages it. And when we're hiring people, we actually look for people who have side projects and passions outside of work. And so a few years ago, a colleague of mine, Sebastian Vieira, and I, we wanted to build apps together and publish them. And so we said, well, let's create an account on the App Store where we can publish our apps. And turns out it could be in one name, so we said, let's build a company. That way we can have a bank account where we can get all the money we're going to make on the App Store. And so we set up a company, and we called it Ifonso. The GmbH is a German term. It's, hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's Gemeinschaft mit beschränkte Haftung, which means basically a limited liability company. Now, we weren't thinking of this much at the time, but it turns out to be a very good idea to have a limited liability company. And so over the next few years, we had a lot of fun. We built lots of apps and published them. These are just a few of them. But I'm slightly embarrassed to say that most of them are quite neglected today, and especially in the last couple of years. But we'll probably get back to updating them soon. One of the apps that I wanted to talk about today is AdMob. And this is the story of that app. We probably need to rewind a little bit to 2015 and iOS 9. And one of the shiny new APIs that came with iOS 9 was content blocking. And why was it a good idea back then to have a content blocker? Apple thought so because, honestly, on the mobile web, ads were getting so intrusive that it took up most of the page. And with limited bandwidth, with limited screen space, ads were really disruptive. And there was a need for content blockers. So when Apple released this API, we saw an opportunity to build an app ourselves. Just a recap of the API in iOS, it's really very simple. You can add a content blocker to your app by simply adding a new target, selecting the content blocker extension template, and that's it. Xcode generates a few files for you. Here's the JSON that it generates. This is basically a set of rules that your content blocker is going to pass on to Safari. So a rule is as simple as this. It says every time you see a resource that contains webkit.svg in this example, and this is literally an example from the template, block it. Don't even bother to load it, right? You can have slightly more complex rules. For instance, you can say all images and style sheets that don't come from this domain, block them. You can have further actions. You can load them but not display them with CSS block. You can force an HTTPS load instead of an HTTP load, and a few more things that you can do that. The interesting thing is it's system-wide. So every instance of Safari or Safari Web View Controller will honor those settings. So if your app is blocking content, it's blocked for all other apps on the system, including Safari. The way you ingest the rules is also very simple. This is, again, the template that you get. And basically, you load your JSON from somewhere. We use CloudKit in our app, but this is just loading it from the main bundle. You attach it to an NS extension item, and that's it. You finish your request, and you've passed on all your rules to the Safari content blocker. As simple as that. Of course, it needs that the user actively engages your blocker. So he has to go to settings, find his way to Safari, content blockers, and then engage your extension. There is no way to do this programmatically, so it's completely under user control. So we built this app called AdMob, which we were quite proud of. It's basically a user interface that allows users to download sets of rules that we aggregated from different places. It also allowed users to submit rules to us. Please block this, please block that. We set up sets of rules, for example, well-known Chinese advertising content, or images, or pop-ups, or that especially annoying EU cookie disclaimer. We could block all that stuff, right? And we were especially proud of this feature, which we added in the second or third version, which was we created an action which you could invoke from Safari, and that would show you this interface where you could specify, even with a WYSIWYG kind of editor, which content on that page needed to be blocked. Right? So here's an example where I've selected the button from the app builder's website and then submit that to the rule set. And we were quite happy with our app. We made some pretty good ranks on several app stores. We were quite happy with it. The thing is, it was a free app initially. And we started receiving, from within the app, emails, dozens of emails every day saying, please add this website, please add this content, please block this, until it became completely unmanageable for us. So a week or two after launching, we decided to make it a paid app, right? So we made it £1. And you can see what happened to our downloads. We had about 22,000 downloads, mostly while it was free, and then down, flatline completely. Nothing happened forever, except for that little blip, which was a news article that appeared in the NZZ in Zurich. But I'll come to that later. So, as you can see, this is not by any stretch of the imagination a very successful app. You can see it tanking like so many other apps on the App Store. So it came as a complete surprise to us on the 4th of March that we received about 200 pages of legalese German stuff, something that would be hard to carry, really heavy, like seriously scary stuff. It arrived by registered post, and inside, in some very scary language, they were telling us that we had violated copyright, we had caused a great extent of financial damage, and the company that was sending us this was a subsidiary of Axel Springer in Germany, right? So apologies if I offended anyone already. Just to give you an idea of what was in there, there were screenshots of our app, there were examples of websites with and without the content blocked. There were even employment contracts of people working in that company showing that they had developed the web pages that we were tampering with. And the claims that they were making, well, let me show you an example of this really scary part. I'm not a German native speaker, and neither is my partner, so this really scared us. We were seeing that we were liable to up to 250,000 euro in damages, and just to make it even nicer, up to 6 months of imprisonment. Now back then we didn't have We didn't have any legal insurance, and we really thought we could be personally liable for all this. They could take our house and our car and our kids, and so it was a really, really scary time. I can't tell you how scary it was. Basically, this is the content, 250,000 euro and 6 months of imprisonment. The main claims that they were making were that AdMob somehow modifies their software being their website. And quoting from some laws, they were saying that a website enjoys copyright protection under any computer program, and that somehow our app was modifying the browser's display options, as if we were some kind of hack, and causing them a huge amount of revenue loss. So why us? I mean, obviously this was not a very successful app. Why were they targeting us? So we reached out to our friends and the community to try and help us understand what was going on. After all, it's not very easy to digest 200 pages of German legalese. So what the conclusions that we reached were that, I mean, basically, if they'd asked us nicely, if they'd called us or sent us an email or even contacted us through the app, we would have said, well, no problem, we just take it off the App Store. We don't want trouble. But they didn't do that. They just went straight, and they probably spent weeks with a whole bunch of lawyers creating this legal content, right? With expert advice and examples of, I mean, there's lots of screenshots in there. So basically what we understand is that they wanted a legal precedent, which means they wanted to use us, not because we were successful, all the contrary, we were not really successful, but they wanted to use us as an example to go after maybe some big guys, right? Which is probably a lesson that we need to learn. You don't have to be a rich and successful company to be sued. In fact, you might be a good target when you're not a big and rich company. They had already lost a couple of lawsuits in Germany against a company called AdBlock Plus and another company called Blocker. And so we came to the conclusion that they wanted to go for the big guys, right? Now the legal process, the first thing we did was we wrote to the judge and said, listen, we don't want any trouble. We didn't mean to cause any harm. We will be happy to remove the app from the App Store. But that didn't work. It wasn't accepted. We proactively removed the app from sale a month later. It didn't make any difference. The next 2 years, this has been really literally 2 years of different court dates and expert opinions that took months to make, and appeals that went on. And it's after 2 years, what we got is I call it a Solomonic decision. That means the judge kind of said, this is too complex, let's award both sides damages. So basically they said that on the count of copyright violation, we were not guilty. We were not changing the software as they claimed, but we had caused them some financial damage. And on that count, we were guilty. Now, could we have appealed? Yes. This just happened a few weeks ago. We could have appealed, but that would probably mean another 3 or 4 years of litigation, and we really had enough of this. I'd like to actually reach out and thank some of the people in the community that helped us understand and supported us. And the first company that I mentioned, Blocker, guess where we met them? We met them at the App Builders in 2016 in Zurich. And I think Arno is here somewhere, or not, maybe. I think they were here again. They put us in touch with AdBlock Plus, we also want to thank, and also a lawyer in Zurich called Christian Lau, who was super supportive. We probably wouldn't have been able to afford him because lawyers in Switzerland are a lot more expensive than lawyers in Germany. But he was kind enough to put us in touch with lawyers in Germany who could defend us. Nicholas Haberkamp in this case. And I've put Apple there because I really wanted to make a mental note of saying how disappointed we were, because we reached out to Apple hoping that they would help us justify that we were not actually tampering with anybody's software. We were just creating an interface that users could use to set up rules, which were then blocked by their software, Apple software. But even though we reached out to Apple through iTunes Connect and we reached out through their software developer evangelists, there was never a single response from them. So that was quite disappointing. So just to do the math at the end of these 2 years, I was adding up stuff a week ago, and we made a total sales of $1,500, right? We made $60 on the German App Store. We sold $60. Our legal costs were 41,000 francs, right? And the experts report, which is the only thing that the German court would recognize is someone with a title, took several months to build this report, that cost us 8,000 bucks. So we're out of pocket by 39,500 francs. Luckily, one of the companies that we contacted was nice enough and reimbursed us most of that money. So in the end, we got away not too badly. In the process, we almost got famous thanks to the NZZ, who made a story about David fighting Goliath and all that sort of thing. So would we do it again? Probably yes. But it's taken us 2 years of being very, very upset with this thing. We haven't touched any of our apps. God knows who's going to sue us next. But we forgive this company. We forgive Axel Springer because they did what they had to do, and we did what we had to do. In that sense, there's no hard feelings, but I wish they'd gone after someone who actually deserved it. And I hear that they're still looking for a new victim. So if you want to be famous briefly, like us, build an ad blocker. Like I said, appealing would have meant fighting for another 3-4 years, and we really didn't have that. So I think all in all, we were super lucky. We were super lucky with this. And we made some learnings, and that's why I asked you guys to be here, so I can tell you things that might help you. So learnings. Number one, limit your liability. If you're an indie developer, if you build apps outside your normal work, then maybe it's a good idea to set up a company, because that way at least your liability is limited to the capital of that company, right? If you're developing in your own name, then your liability is your entire assets, right? In Switzerland, for example, setting up a GmbH or an LLC requires a minimum founding capital of 20,000 francs, right? That doesn't mean that money is gone or is blocked in any way. That is money that your company is then going to use to operate. In other countries in the EU, the founding capital goes between 25,000 and 35,000 euro. But in Germany, I understand there is a variant of this, which is called the Unternehmergesellschaft, which requires a founding capital of just €1, but there are some conditions. Over time, you need to increase the capital of the company. So that's a pretty interesting variant if you're working out of Germany. The second tip or second piece of advice I have, be transparent. If this is something you're doing on the side, let your employer know. It's probably a bit late in the day if you say, hey boss, I'm in the press tomorrow or today, or I just got sued. So it's good to get these things out in the open early. A third tip I have is get legal insurance. We didn't have any, so we were completely freaked out when we got this. It is a source of comfort to know that you have legal insurance. In Switzerland, again, it's about 200 francs a year if you're an individual. If you're a small company, then 500 francs a year or so would get you decent coverage. And my fourth tip is connect. Thanks to the connections we made here at App Builders and in the community, we were able to survive this. Otherwise, I think we would have just given up right in the beginning, said, just tell me where I have to pay and let's go home. And that's all I have for you. Thank you, and